we're gonna have to start recording these and then putting out some sort of channel for this within the
Mm,
server. That way, people know about it. Because
right.
I get the feeling not a lot of people know.
Yeah, there's definitely. I have a couple of friends in here that were they weren't completely, I guess, aware of the speaker session thing. So
Yeah, one day I will lure smoke away in here, and that'll be a fun day. But it's gonna
yeah.
be a minute. Okay, we're getting some of the regular people in here. Gulp couldn't make it today, but he's usually not able to talk around this time, anyways. But uh, so we'll just more or less start now, just to get it rolling here. But today will be recorded to anyone listening and anyone speaking. We may not put out the recording because I still have some issues with. It's a little difficult to record yourself and then Discord people as well. Like a lot of issues with levels in recording. So I'm trying to work those out. But once I have all the bugs worked out on that, we should be putting out recorded versions of these until we figure out exactly what we're doing here. For now, it'll just be called AI Homebrew because it's just a convenient name. But I'm hoping there's not another podcast out there called that. But if that's what we're doing here, we'll have to get something unique as far as the name goes. So suggestions for that will help. But as far as that, anyone that would like to speak about today's topic is free to raise their hand. Today's topic is stepping into tomorrow, diving into a crystal ball of technology. The future is now, predicting AI's impact on society. The riveting exploration takes us beyond the algorithms and code to envision how AI could reshape the world from utopian dreams of AI enhanced humans and societies to dystopian warnings of job displacement and loss of privacy. We're going to tackle it all. Yeah, I'm reading something Gulp did so that when he listens to it later, he'll get a kick out of that.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was like, all right, suggest another topic, Gulp, and then he's just like, okay, straight to GPT.
Yeah.
Another thing we'll be doing is for today, we're going to be a lot more harsh on serial over talkers, and we're going to try to keep questions to probably a minimum of three.
I do find it very interesting. I can immediately, whether it be via text or be via, I guess, speech, ChatGPT has a very unique style. It's standard, obviously, if you ask in the form of in the nature of write as if Shakespeare or as if a very Kafkaesque story. But it's sort of standard procedure for writing. I can almost recognize it pretty quickly. I'm like, that sounds like that looks like ChatGPT wrote that. That sounds like something ChatGPT. And they're like, yeah, how did you know? It's like I don't know how exactly I sort of parse that, but you can pretty quickly tell, and it's interesting.
The irony of with ChatGPT is that it mainly you can tell if it's just ChatGPT. If you give it a very simple prompt, it will
Mm,
spit out ChatGPT accented stuff. But if you give it good seed material, it's indistinguishable from other things. Uh, it's it's more difficult to pin down as ChatGPT specifically.
hmm When you
The,
add more prompts in and you
yeah, the more seed material, it's kind of strange. Okay, so if anyone would like to raise their hand, by the way, we need some people to come in and talk. And, okay, we have our favorite. Okay, I invited you. Hello, Hacked.
Hi, thank you for invitation. So I've been joining for the second time to your space, or what do you call in Discord?
I think is there a term for it?
I'm not sure. I think
What
it's just audience. I don't know.
uh, what is it called in Discord?
Oh, it's called the stage. That's what it's called.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I see. I keep trying to. I couldn't remember either.
Yeah, so I used to in spaces, but in Discord, I've only joined in your space, and really the servers to which I have joined, only few of them have hosted the spaces, and they were on different topics, so I couldn't speak on them.
Oh, okay. Well, what
So,
was your question for the day?
you have been put the topic which you have put is the you're predicting going to predict what are the impacts of AI in our society. So, like what I want to say is in terms of education, what do you feel like? There are different countries. Some are developing, some are underdeveloped, some have already evolved. So, keeping all those things in scenario and people maintaining the generation gap, how will AI be implemented in terms of education in future? Like as of now, it is still in the nascent age, yet it has made a lot change to the one those who know about it. But in future, how education will be affected with the help of AI?
Uh,
Like in the COVID
for the
era,
most part,
already.
education is mainly going to be optimized by AI. It's going to be heavily personalized to people. We've spoken before on topics of people with neurodivergent brains, so it can cater to everyone's learning style. For example, I learn very well through audio. I'm not as I'm like audio learner and physical learner, but I can't necessarily watch things and learn that way, or reading even isn't the best way for me to learn things. So I'm very like audible. So you can to to optimize that for me personally, it would be a lot of audio and a lot of like physical examples of doing stuff with my hands on whatever thing you're trying to teach me that is. But as far as that goes, you're generally just going to see AI being integrated into everything regards to education. It's it's a throughput thing where the amount of information that can be delivered to a student is significantly faster and more catered to them. So I hope that makes sense to you. But overall, it's just going to be like supercharged. Uh, the the children of today will know far more than any generation before at the age of 10. Then uh, it'll be the same for the next generation. They're going to learn faster too.
And then I
Yeah.
think some of the other things you talked about is like the difference between sort of developing and developed nations, and um, more on that topic. Like the issue with a lot of, let's say, developing nations is that they've sort of been exported for resources, and that doesn't necessarily build a middle class economy. And so that's sort of the big step for a developing nation to get from developing to developed. That's the one that currently China's trying to bridge that gap. And I think that with the implementation of AI, at some point, n- um, the middle class no longer is a necessity, because a lot of that becomes automated, and a lot of that sort of labor becomes automated, and a lot of that sort of governance. The other issue is when you have a high amount of resources, let's say you have oil or you have rare earth minerals, that allows for sort of instant access by any group to that resource, without the need for a overarching government, right? And that leads to a lot of sort of corruption issues, which is a lot of what's going on in sort of a lot of African countries, because they have these resources. You don't need a massive amount of infrastructure to build a mine. And so that's one of the sort of issues that they're facing now. My opinion, at least, is that when this AI is implemented in all sorts of these facets, you're gonna see a lot less of that. And so when we're dealing with more um, and it's going to be a little bit longer term on the manual labor, but once the robotics industry is caught up, then there's no incentive for anyone to have that level of corruption, because it all becomes automated. And at least in my opinion, it's going to drastically raise the standard of living for all countries, whether they be developed or underdeveloped. The big step there is going to be the speed at which we can build infrastructure. So even if we have all this technology, if it still takes us the same amount of time to build roads and to put in power lines and to put in internet access and all sort of the things that you don't really see going on in this country, you see maintenance and upkeep. Those are going to be the biggest hurdles. And like I mentioned previously, once those become far more efficient via the integration, AI plus engineering, then you're really going to see things take off.
A quick comment, by the way, is that internet is already being solved for with Starlink. Anyone can just slap down a satellite and it'll be plenty of bandwidth for pretty much anyone on the globe, especially since we're headed towards the V2 satellites. So it'll be significantly faster and more stable. So we're headed towards a world where nobody has. The only reason someone will not have access to the internet is due to extreme poverty. So, and obviously, internet access is going to help a lot of people drag themselves out of extreme poverty.
Hmm.
To answer Varun,
like
real quick, yeah, it's been a while since I've used Google. I probably will use Google in the future if their recent showcase, where pretty much when you search things, it gives you a much more detailed AI return response with links and stuff. But for the most part, it the use cases for the classic search engine is just going away. You don't really need that info from it, especially since ChatGPT can now use Bing, which is a lot more helpful, especially if you're, dealing with a problem that's a bit more complicated.
Yeah, that way around, what I see, like people are switching more into Chat GPT, and only some traditional people, like who are used to Google, they keep on using Google instead of Chat GPT. Yet the number users have tremendously increased. And now, recently, I faced a issue in terms of like quality of content. Like AI is helping people to create contents nowadays very easily. So many contents are being created, yet the quality of content are like we cannot like they are not very honest to in creating content. They are just creating contents, and the contents are so numerous that we are not able to filter out. So what do you feel like how AI will help us in future just to filter out the content that which we should listen to, which we should like view, or what actually can help us basically in industries like cybersecurity, where things are very much we need to be very specific, and there are a lot of materials which are just floating around and outdated. Yet, with the advancement of technology, we need informations which are updated and which actually helps us. Yet, we cannot filter out those things. So, how can AI help in that terms? Do you have any idea regarding the future of the infosec in relation to AI?
Well, AI is just going to significantly improve our issues with trying to parse through tons of information. Even what OpenAI has recently done is better in betting. So searching is much more efficient from them with their technology. You're also getting into things like vector databases, which are trendy, but they have their uses. And a lot of other database related stuff. So you're reaching a point where AI is going to be very good at parsing through information and finding what information is the most useful to the problem. So even things like cybersecurity are going to be improved by that because it can look for vulnerabilities much faster than a human can. So just overall, it's kind of the answer to everything as far as it will also create more vulnerabilities, but it's going to solve a ton of them. So there's a double-edged sword there. By the way, if anyone else would like to raise their hand, we can move on to some other topics here. uh,
Interesting question. Like in terms of content creation, like how will AI affect the content creators? Like there are different platforms like TikTok or Facebook or YouTube Shorts
that's
and other.
actually just sorry to interrupt, but that's actually something I've been observing recently. Is like there's got to be some fear to like especially Twitch streamers and stuff like that, where the technology's not far off of just replacing them. Where you have a an AI entertainer that never has an off day. So that threatens their ability to entertain people. Even Joe Rogan right now, with current technology, if they just spent a little bit of money, he could automate parts of his podcast with just him and like put it out for fun. But he would be able to skip entire episodes just because he felt like it. I'm not saying he would ever do that, but the technology exists right now where you can very well clone his voice and others and then generate scripts.
I think there's probably always going to be a niche for individuals, you know, but I think what this allows people to do is have more access to content. Um, I think the things that are probably going to be lost on is sort of the Hollywood style prestige of being famous in that way, because it's going to make content creation something on the individual level, on the individual scale. There's still going to be people who, when interacting with until we're like integrated and it can like read thoughts and minds and signals from our brain, which we could speculate on that time frame, but until that point we still have to communicate our wants and desires when it comes to what we want, right? And there's going to be people who are able to more efficiently do that and more efficiently understand what prompts and what suggestions in order to make the most likable content. So I think that's something to be taken into consideration as well. That's not to say that, because in the form of content creation, if we're thinking of YouTubers and Twitch streamers, that's something of the last 20 years. So if that fades away, that's not really that big of a change, at least in my opinion. I know some might disagree. That's not that big of a change in the realm of human history. Most of our stuff has always been in person. When it comes to sort of theater and art and dance and music, only within that last sort of 20-year gap has that really moved on to sort of technology-based platform. So it's possible we could revert that, while you know I highly doubt that people won't want to go and watch a live band at a pub with their friends. But when it comes to like comedians or film, or as you can already see with VTubers, like what's the difference? And I don't personally watch VTubers, but what's the difference between a VTuber and there's a person behind there, or it's a VTuber and there's not a person behind there? If you don't know and you aren't able to tell, content wise, there's really not there's not a gap at all between those two things. So, but I
Yeah,
also don't see this as negatively impacting the everyman. If you think about content creators we're looking at on Twitch and YouTube, etc., that's not a very large portion of the population. And so, not without sounding, I guess, cold and calculating, if they were to lose that, and would have to do other things, then it's not really a threat. It's not. It's not an existential threat if Asmon Gold no longer is able to make content, right?
Yeah, like for every content, there are a lot of audience, and yet it will remain for some time, and some new things may emerge with the advancement of the AI, or we may like tend to have some different taste. But
Yeah, and
as of now,
it's going to take a
we are
while to
sticking to.
transition to that as well. It's not going to be an overnight thing, I don't think, because I mean we're already seeing it start to happen, but it's not really being effective. Like, we're not, even with the level of AI and stuff that we have, we're not really effectively using it yet in regards to content creation. Like he mentioned with the Joe Rogan thing, like we haven't really fully integrated it. Obviously, you see like memes and stuff where they're um, the videos where they've sort of like done the video and the audio of someone speaking, but we're not seeing like full podcasts with a completely generated person really take off. Even though, from a technical standpoint, I think we're already there. We could do that. So there's always going to be a lag time between what we are capable of, what we're currently doing, and what is popular among the people. Those three things always, it takes one after the other after the other.
And so, like, and there are many channels where, like, we don't show the faces and of fun, like facts channel or some other channels. And in that way, AI can help them tremendously to give them the voices, and also like for the animation part in future.
Well,
So there
in,
are.
in turn, that also is being automated because you don't need that tutorial video anymore. Eventually, we're going to have image modality with these bigger models, and I don't know if you've ever watched how it's made, but once we have video modality, is what I mean, full on videos being generated, and AI is going to be able to show you exactly how something's built. That there's no video for it. It's just going to be able to take a series of generated images and give you an idea of what goes on. As these things get more and more accurate, it's effectively going to be able to generate anything like that. So you have like a physical issue, you're trying to fix your lawnmower or something, it'll just show you images of your lawnmower and how to fix it.
And recently, I attended a, conference on like a session on Microsoft Build. They talked about AI, where they were like targeting some health companies, and they were able to find out the uh, reason behind the disease, and they were able to get the treatment for it, and they were able to mitigate the problems. So what do you feel like how health industry will be affected in future in terms the AI is like where the AI is proceeding towards as of now? What are your views?
Well, in the short term, especially in a for profit health system like we have now, there'll be a bit less profit because of people being able to treat themselves, or more importantly, stop themselves from getting in a position where they need to be treated. But the longevity of like the patient is, they live longer. So on a larger societal scale, like people are just around longer, and everyone eventually needs the hospital at some point or a doctor's visit. So you're still going to have these physical need to go into a medical establishment to get treatment, but virtually there's going to be a lot more that you can do that's honestly just going to make a lot more people healthy. You can get advice and treatment very quickly, as well as even just diagnoses directly from an AI.
Yeah, AI can definitely help in that way. Like they can give the accurate diagnosis that we require. Also, uh, can suggest us in a better way.
Yes, this saves doctors a ton of time. So when they really need to like help someone, they can do it. They're not constantly having to deal with a lot of intermediary steps in between seeing what the patient, seeing the patient and finding out exactly what they have. Like the information is just delivered to them before the doctor ever even sees them. That's obviously what we do now, but everyone's pretty much seen their doctor walk into another room after they speak with you for a moment. A lot of times there's a bit of a private uh, med site that they use and talk with each other on. There's all sorts of ways to troubleshoot what's going on with the patient. There's databases, right? And they have to go back and look at that. That's an extra step. That's more time per patient.
Like
There's a lot of cost savings that are going to happen within the medical industry, as well as more people will get far more care because each and every doctor and nurse, their time is saved by this technology. There's obviously going to be degrees of issues with layoffs and stuff like that because of certain things being automated, but there's also a problem right now, especially in America, with the amount of nurses we actually have, as well as doctors. It's difficult to hire these people. It's a hard job. It's a really hard job. I mean, they work like 12-hour shifts.
yeah, like like in COVID era, we have seen how they actually struggled and they actually cope up with the situation, and they really struggled. So eventually, that human is required. Yet with AI, and they can create new some artificial humans which can actually help those situations. But that scenario will be different. We cannot discuss it as of now because men cannot be replaced with machines in such situations because AI is not able to make that emotional connect because I feel like the emotional connect was more required during the COVID era when people were hospitalized. And machine cannot actually handle that. But if the intensity of the disease is more, then obviously they can help. Many companies have done that, but it was not that successful. People tend to have that personal connect all the time, even the intensity of disease or the danger behind or the risks be high. Uh, what I feel is with the advancement of AI, like AI has got a lot of our health data. So like while recruiting people for different industries, like for military personnel or for new team members or some for a company to recruit while going to recruit new teams, we can also use this AI data or the health data just to see the personality of the individual or the psychology of the individual. What do you feel like how this will affect while going to recruit or hire some individuals in terms of their education or background, along with the health data? Because nowadays we don't have a set routine. If they get to know our data, they will know that our sleep patterns, our health, hygiene, everything. So how the people will be affected in future when they will apply for some jobs or are things like what are the consequences? Do you have any idea?
So the consequences of people being basically screened based on their health, you would say. I mean, that's obviously a possibility, but I I would assume that that would also, here in America we have like equal opportunity hiring practices that most companies have to go by. So there's degrees of like not going to be able to discriminate based on that, but there could be very specific reasons like just severe health issues that enable someone to not be able to do any work within certain contexts. But it's hard to say. I mean, it's certainly a possible vector, but I'm not super sure how it'll be implemented, to be honest, or whether or not it'll be legally allowed to implement in the short term. Um,
I
because
also
you also here we have you're not allowed to just share people's health data here in the states. Like that's not legal. So I don't even think you could screen
There
on
are
that.
regulations on that, and it's a confidential thing. Yet, if they like certain data, if it is leaked, like certain data has been breached, and if it is available, then obviously that can be utilized
Well,
in a different way.
you'd probably be breaking the law by using that data because it's leaked data. You're not allowed. Now, I'm not sure about every other country, and I'm not a legal expert. Johnny would have more to say about this, to be honest.
yeah, there's a specific it's called HIPAA. So HIPAA basically is the medical data that you have, and any sort of in most cases, companies aren't really allowed to have access to that. Now, insurance is a company that is allowed to have access to that because it's sort of in the process of what they do to need to know that information. But as far as hiring practices, I'll give two statements. One on the legality of that, and that would be highly illegal. We have a regulatory body for that. It goes against HIPAA outright. So, in any situation where we have an AI that's sort of getting that information, the assumption then would be that governmental organizations would also be able to recognize those hiring patterns and say, hey, look at this, boom, 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 boom. All these people who met these qualifications but had health issues were denied jobs. Now we're starting to see a pattern emerge here, because everything's just, pattern recognition when it comes to sort of AI software. Then an investigation would take place, and then they would get in a lot of serious trouble. The second thing of why I don't see that as an issue is by the time that we are able to sit down and hire someone and scan them and see everything medically wrong with them, there would have to be some assumption that most of that stuff can be taken care of, because the amount of technology that, and I guess the amount of just to be able to scan someone and on those minute differences be like they're susceptible to this, they're susceptible to that, and know all that. On the company side, then we're so advanced to a point where we no longer have to worry about most of that stuff. Um, since there's no exchange of information between your primary care physician, your doctor, your nurse, and whatever medical insurance you have, and the company you work for, unless they're providing the medical insurance. But then they can't really, you know, they can't. Some of that information is not allowed to be accessed. So it really genuinely should not be an issue based on the regulatory sort of statutes we have in place in regards to that.
Yeah, there's also other aspects to employment going forward. Is that most workers, to anyone that actually has a job, they're going to have a lot more things with them that are helping them do their job better. So, for example, if you had a guy with back issues, currently the the company Boston Dynamics, they're selling these robots that sit on top of a crate and it's just got suction cups and it moves boxes, right? And it's a pretty good machine. It's very efficient. It can do 12 hours of work in a day and then it has to charge. It's meant to be mobile, but it takes a lot of the physical off of the work of unloading trucks. There's a few separate companies that are also doing this, but they're not like controlled by AI right now. However, there are some obviously being worked on, but in the short term, what that does is somebody has to operate that. So it wouldn't actually stop someone who has some sort of physical issues that make it harder for them to work. Maybe even slight emotional issues that, they wouldn't really, they're kind of just doing a simple task, right? Moving the boxes with a robot's power. So there are even degrees to employment in the technical space where a lot of writing is extremely assisted now. If you need to write reports and stuff like that, most people these days, if they're smart, honestly, are using their seed material, assuming there's no legal issues with what they're posting, for company stuff, but concerns for leaks and stuff like that. They are being heavily assisted by AI, and what that does is helps people's mental health in general. So in the short term, there's a lot of issues that we're able to mitigate just by people being helped by the tools that we're using to work these days. Of course, that's leading to automation of certain things and need for less people in certain areas, but that's just kind of the consequences of progress. Obviously, more jobs will be created in certain ways, but we are going to lose a lot of other jobs. This is just kind of the nature of progression.
Yeah, verily, I feel like there will be new jobs created and the other jobs will be losing. And like there are concerns like people who have learned their whole life on certain technologies and now they are dying, and they're not able to switch into new technology because it takes time. So obviously that is a concern. So what do you
Augmented
feel like
reality is
how
going to fix that. It's not going to fix it entirely, but it's going to help it. Finish your question. Sorry, I interrupted.
this problem can be like reduced? This will be a psychological problem and personal problem also, will be a problem for the nation in terms of employment. So how this is being fixed? What do you feel like? What actually will be the people has to adopt new technology, or they will be like personally do it, or government is taking some actions, or in the long run eventually we have time to switch into those technologies? What do you feel like as of now? How is the impact on industry and those people who have been into those technology and those are dying out with AI?
Well, this ties into education, and obviously, our governments are going to have to step in here and help with some form of UBI. Just you're not going to catch everyone. Like, not everyone is going to be able to retrain and do another job. It would be logical to say that. Now, what we are going to have is people are generally going to be helped by technology. It's going to be much faster and automated to train someone to do virtually anything, even like software engineering. Like, if you have any remote interest and you're like afraid of writing code, you can get a lot of work done these days with AI and learn a ton in the process. So we're also headed towards augmented reality, where you could effectively train anyone to do any job. That means if you've ever played a video game with quest markers and stuff like that, everything the person can do once we reach a level of augmented reality where it can highlight parts on a vehicle, say someone's being trained to be a mechanic, the database will pull up the vehicle he's working on. It'll have inventory of all the parts. Whatever needs to be fixed on it is being highlighted. Whatever bolts need to be removed is being highlighted. There's just like a general future of things are easier to do, easier to learn. There's always an AI in the background holding your hand. So people being retrained is oddly enough not going to be a problem. People really underestimate or just possibly don't imagine what the future is going to be like with levels of AR. AR is just, it's not just adding skins on your boss to make him look like a leopard for fun. It's, it's going to be like very helpful to people. A lot of like HUD related stuff where you can have tasks lined up on the side of your user interface within this. There's a lot of degrees of this that are extremely promising. Like I'm not even that worried about people being displaced, because when there are jobs that humans can do, it's not going to be that hard to retrain them to do it. Obviously, in the short term, this is going to be difficult, but AR and things like Jarvis. Once we create that well enough, is going to severely assist even the elderly with learning new technologies.
Hmm. Someone in the chat had mentioned that the impact of AI on politics, both domestic and international. The international is very, that's quite complicated. So I think I'm going to start talking about the domestic first. So obviously, anytime we're, I think anytime discussing AI, you need to speak about the short term and the long term because I think those are just so vastly different by what's possible and what will happen. And I'd say that the short term is under 50 years is what I consider the short term. So stuff in our lifetime, hopefully, right? So the domestic on the short term, I think we'll see a lot more integration when it comes to the financial aspects. I think that's the initial sort of stuff. So like if you're not super familiar what's going on with like currently with like the Fed pivot and the raising of rates to combat inflation and now putting a hold on that, like all that stuff is us thinking, okay, given the market, given inflation, we think this is going to be the best outcome. um, However, if given enough data, any sort of program or AI is going to give us much more efficient and more accurate predictions on outcomes. And so there's absolutely no reason when it comes to stuff like the Fed, and then it comes to finance policies and sort of how much money to allocate. How can we allocate money more efficiently? What's the most efficient way to have a tax system? Stuff like that is going to be the first areas of government on the domestic that are going to have integration because those are things where there's no fear involved, right? There's no like, oh, my president's a robot. Oh, I'm so scared, right? There's none of that. It's like, oh, this tool is how it's going to be viewed. This tool has helped us reduce the national debt. It's helped us combat inflation. So that's going to be the initial, like in the next 50 years for sure. If they're have anything together, God willing, then that's going to be the steps taken. Um, in the long term, I see the role of the political to be more akin to an sort of Aristotle sort of role in society, where it's more of a philosopher, where it's great thinkers, and they serve more of the role of the Queen of England, R.I.P., where there is a cultural power there, right? But there is not necessarily a political power. It's something that people can look to for cultural heritage and significance, but it's not something that necessarily has the same amount of power. People are always going to want to feel as if they have this democracy, this election process that people really like that, especially in the United States. It's very important to them. So in I guess in the medium term, that's where I see things starting to shift to. On the international scale, I think that AI, if it's more of a fear, will function um, essentially in the way that any sort of advancement in technology does. It just makes it even more impossible for us to have any sort of large scale conflict because there's more at risk, there's more loss, we lose more. So, the more advanced we get, the more we lose from large scale conflict. And I think AI will function in the same. And I think that from an international, it will be a lot easier to find pathways towards peace and negotiation and compromise because we'll be able to, it won't just be limited to the human imagination. So that would be the positive outlook of international relations. It'll also make a lot more fair and equitable sort of arrangements when it comes to trade. So we'll be able to find, okay, what's the most, what do you have that I want, and how can we get these? Because really, international politics is about economics. And so if you can improve the economic interactions and transactions between nations, then you improve relations overall. So that's my opinion as a political scientist.
Other aspects on the negative, before I take Varen's question here, is that we are going to be dealing with AI has degrees of danger when it comes to politics, obviously. Everyone can picture it, but in the upcoming election, there's going to be a great deal of people just generating AI stuff for fun of the presidential candidates saying nothing they would ever say. Obviously, we've been seeing stuff like that in mostly comedy for a while now, but you're going to see a lot of weird stuff when the elections of America start really ramping up here, where it's
I would caution and advise for you to not engage in that, given the previous person during the what was it the 2016 election that made the joke about the early voting and made the
Mhm.
little infographic that was it was very clearly satirical, and they're probably going to go to prison for a very long time. So I would I would caution anyone listening, don't engage in that where uh, there could be dire consequences from the federal government.
Yes.
Continue.
Do not tell people that you can vote via text. That's not a good idea.
Yeah.
It it it's leading to one man's. As funny as that is, it's leading to
It's
a
funny.
guy. It's leading to a guy's life being upended completely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Varen, what did you want to speak about here?
Hey, Jobby Fee, thank you so much for handing me the mic. Honestly, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I just want to add a few things on international relations. Like I think about this a lot. So I don't know if like people realize, but AGI is going to be really different from what we predict right now. So an example of this would be imagine you are in 1950s and you just got a gist of like you just read somewhere in a headline that now people can compute faster than compute humans. You would be like, oh my God, yeah, that is some level of technological advancement. But no one at that time would have predicted that we would have a billion times stronger computer in our pockets, giving us exact coordinates of where we were standing on a blue dot. And I think like this kind of parity between our thoughts and predictions is like very important to take in into consideration. So AG, like understand that this thing is literally alive. It's a brain in a jar. And right now, what we are doing is we are sending chits inside that jar and then it writes something out and gives it back, right? So I feel like what will happen is eventually it will start seeing the world, it will start listening to world, it will like get this all multimodalistic sort of like behavior. And that would be like the real singularity when like it can actually interact with the environment. And it's not very far, right? That's very predictable. But what's gonna happen is like AGI is so powerful. Like recently, like I even mentioned in the chat before, OpenAI released this new safety letter or something, which basically said that once you have AGI that is as good as one large corporation, for example Google, you will have that AGI exponentially increase to a level that is as good as 10 large corporations, and then 100, and so on and so forth. So there, that day of singularity is not very far away. And taking this set of concepts of predictions and then applying into different domains. For example, we can say like what happens to the economy. You will see that economy is going to change completely, literally completely. I cannot emphasize on this fact, because let's go down to the fundamentals of economics, right? What is a market? A market is a place where a buyer comes in to the seller, or a seller comes in to the buyer, and they exchange some sort of goods or services in order to get that currency, which is like what famously Elon Musk said is you can think of it as like the information theory, and like the networks and the jitteriness and stuff like that. So what is going to happen is like my prediction is it's not a prediction. I see a clear path to this. That is like once AI comes into power, or I should not say like into power, like it starts empowering people. we would see a lot of goods and services being deployed and being used and like generated really cheaply. So you can think of it as like, for example, if you're buying an iPhone for $1,300 right now, you might be able to buy that same iPhone for like probably $13. So instantly you would have a wealth
Everything
increase.
is a race to zero in cost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Yeah. So I think like, in order for that market to work, in order for that buyer to come in the market and the seller to be together and buy things, it would be literally, there would be no match to the AI. Because imagine this. So if you have a farmer that raises potatoes, right? And it's a very niche example, but it sort of solidifies the point where it takes the farmer, let's say, $1 to grow that potato, and then he comes to the market and sells it for a markup for $4 and total to five, and a buyer who wants potatoes is very happy to pay $5 for that. But now imagine an AGI, a group, an army of robots making potatoes at a fraction, not even a fraction, like legitimately, like,
For a cent.
yeah,
Yeah,
one,
for a
not even
penny.
0.0% of price of that farmer would like literally obliterate all the whole seller's market. So now
Mm.
every person who's coming to the market instantly has infinite potatoes. Not actually infinite, it's a sigmoid function, but you can understand, right? And that's when I think is like that's singularity for me, because it's so difficult to predict what happens next. And I don't know, if there is no economy, then what is the meaning of markets? And if there are no markets, then what is the meaning of governments? And if there are no governments, then what is the meaning of borders and countries? And like, it's really, really crazy.
Yeah, I think the reason why, the only reason why I think there's going to be lag time behind that is it comes down to the infrastructure that I talked about earlier on. So in somewhere like the United States, or like in a lot of European countries, or in Japan or South Korea, where all the infrastructure is already in place, right, for this sort of stuff, it's going to be so much faster than in very, very rural nations, where it's going to take a little bit more time to deploy those measures, right? I also think people are very stubborn to change. I think those are the two factors that are going to slow it down. But if you were to predict how slow, I think you would overestimate. I think you would absolutely overestimate how much it's going to slow it down. And so that's why, again, it's important to say short term, which is below 50 years. And so a lot of that stuff within, 20 years, what you're talking about, is going to be implemented. But I don't usually try to think of, okay, what is in the most advanced city in the world, what is the current conditions of living, because that's not ubiquitous. That doesn't really, you get what I'm saying. So I try to think more on a global perspective, or really the best way to think about it is the most poverty stricken area. What is the current climate in the most impoverished, most underdeveloped area? And so if that's where we base our technological progress off of, then in the 50-year time span, I think we'll reach what you're talking about. Maybe 60 years for it to be through all sort of parts of society.
Yeah, there's generally going to be a lag time behind a lot of things. For example, your potato thing. I'm no expert on farming, but from what I understand, we have issues with keeping nitrogen in the ground because we do a lot of monocrop agriculture, which is not very good for the topsoil. So you have to inject nitrogen into the soil to make it so we can actually grow things still. Because basically, especially here in America, like we heavily subsidize soy and corn, so that creates that monocrop agriculture, and they're obviously having a problem in European countries because they're trying to ban nitrogen, which is difficult because this does create a problem for our topsoil, but you also need to feed people. Generally speaking, right now, we do produce a ton of food. The main problem is actually shipping it to people. We throw away a ton of food every year. In Canada, the dairy farmers have to throw away a lot of milk every year Some of that's due to regulation, but some of it is also due to inability to ship it. You produce too much. It's very difficult. A lot of roads that are icy up there. It's not the easiest thing to just run a pipe from your farm to the grocery store, so to speak. So, in general, a lot of farming issues that we have are more about infrastructure and shipping, but we we're obviously developing technologies that we need to develop that AI is oddly enough going to help us develop, which is degrees of farming in more stacked environments, so in buildings and stuff, but that'll mainly be for greens. The problem with those right now is energy cost. It's literally an electricity cost. As far as how much you can actually grow depends on how high you pay your bill, because they grow pretty fast indoors. But we're going to need that technology for space travel and Mars colonization, obviously. But
Yeah,
there will be a significant lag time. It's not going to be over 50 years, but it's also not going to be under 10 years that potatoes go to zero. That's all.
No,
That's all
no,
I'm saying.
okay. So I absolutely agree that we have agricultural problems and stuff like that, right? But you also have to acknowledge the fact that AI that we see, for example, LLMs and stuff like this, is only just like a minor or even like minute part of the whole picture, because in reality, I would argue like we have vast numbers of AI. For example, have you seen what DeepMind has been doing recently? They literally solved the protein solving problem, which was predicted to be solved after
Yes,
like
they solved 150. I think it's either 250 or 150 million years of research in like a
yes,
week.
in a week, right? So that's the level of a improvement we are talking about, and it's exponential. And I'll give you a very good example of this. Like, I want you guys to think about this, okay? So this is a very famous question that is asked to like differentiate between your linearity and exponential thinking way of thinking. Here's the premise. Imagine if there is a big pond, a large pond, right? And on day one, you have one fish that doubles every day. On which day is the pond half full?
I think it's like I don't remember the actual thing, but obviously it's like day 20 or something. I can't
Day
remember.
20? Yeah, that's a very good guess. Anyone else want to guess? Maybe in the chat. Good boy, Johnny.
Geez, the day 10.
10. It's all good, man. That's a very, very, very good guess. But the actual answer is that the pond is half full on 49th day.
Oh, okay. It was either 20 or 40. I don't remember the
Yes.
actual number, but yeah, it basically the all the progress in technology because of the doubling effect all happens in like the last 4 days.
Last 4 days, right? Yeah. So
Yes.
if you like in if you look at that example and see in retrospect, you will see like okay, so you're doubling every day. So on day two, it's like we have four fishes, and on day the 25 we have X fishes, but on day 49th we have half the number of the pond is half full, and because it is doubling the every day, the pond is full the other day. But what happens on, let's say, 51 day? What happens then? We have another pond of that same level, of that same full pond. So that is the power of exponentiation. And another great example comes from quantum computing, which is like well, that is a whole another rabbit hole. But there's a
Yeah, it
very
is.
famous,
Yeah, we're gonna keep doubling the
literally.
qubits.
Yeah, exactly, right. So there's a very great example like this IBM researcher gave online, and she said, so imagine if so there was a king, and he was very ruthless. But one day, uh, this like a person comes to him and he does something that pleases the king. So king says, okay, I'm gonna reward you, ask whatever you want. So that peasant said, after giving a lot of thought, he said, I just want 1 grain of rice That is that, and double it every day for the next 50 days. And the king was like, oh my God, that is simple. Like, you just take 1 grain of rice and that's all you need. You don't need that $10,000 or whatever, the gold. And he said, no, I just want 1 grain of rice that doubles every day till day 50th or 64th or something. And the king was like, okay, let's do that. And initially, the king started giving like 2 grains of rice, then like probably one kg of rice on day 5 or something. And then it started to double. And by the day 60th or day 50th, the king had to sell his whole empire because he's a king and he has given a word. He has to sell his whole empire to buy enough rice to give it to that person. So that's the power of exponentiation. And right now, GPT-4. Do you remember that meme that we saw? Like GPT-3, that like a small dot, and GPT-4 is like big, like a big long
Yes,
circle.
that came from the Lex Friedman podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, big kudos to him.
He's apologized for creating that meme on accident because it wasn't true.
Yeah, was it with Andrej, I guess? That's when he did it or something.
He was just speaking about the current capabilities of GPT-3.
I think
GPT-3.
I think that the sort of parables you're giving is the reason why I really don't want to make post, let's say, 60-year predictions,
Yeah.
because it's just unfathomable. Like, even if you look at like science fiction, like novelists and what they assume to be, because I think that's the only people who ever have a somewhat reasonable grasp on what's going to be feasible within a 80-year, 90-year span, 60, 70 years. They don't always get it right, obviously, because it is fiction. But if you were to ask even people within the fields that they're working in engineering and science, they sort of lack the imagination, because that's what you have to do. It's purely imaginatory. Obviously, um, knowing the technology helps, but knowing the technology of the time is sort of boxing in a way, because you have to think through that lens. So, and again, the only things that will be an issue will result more in the physical world than obviously in the actual with the AI, because that's going to advance far beyond our wildest imagination. It's just the implementation of that into the physical. So once robotics, whatever time robotics happens and we have the manufacturing plants for that, then it's going to be, in my opinion, and then a matter of years, just because a robot can only work so fast as well, right? So obviously a robot can dig a hole faster to put the power line in, right? But it's not like it's going to do it in, 100th of a second, right? It's I mean, maybe in 80 years, 90 years it can.
Yeah,
But
we're
like
dealing with physics in the short term. Another
yeah.
aspect to mention here is that you need to also picture that the doubling every day isn't exactly what we may reach, because the only thing genuinely slowing AI advancement right now is GPUs and lack of them.
So have you
So,
seen what DeepMind has been doing recently? They actually cracked a 50-year-old matrix multiplication problem
yes, sir.
in 24 hours.
They yes, they removed a step from the
Step, yeah.
matrix, and that
And that was
improves by 10 to 20%, depending. Mainly, it improves on GPU architecture.
yes.
But yes, I'm
But
aware of
it's more
this.
than 20% actually. It's way more than that because it was an exponential curve, and the amount of steps that you do is like n to the power of n, or whatever the log is. I don't even know the actual number, but yeah, it was a considerable like amount of improvement. So mathematics, like Elon Musk said, like physics is the only law, and physics is the only law, and time is the only real currency. So we have these two constraints, and rest everything is like possible. So if it is physically possible, we can do it. And in the fields of mathematics, the whole domain is sort of like unexplored and is constrained by our human abilities. And I think that in future we'll have more companies like DeepMind who are trying to solve greater mathematical problems using AI. There's this company. Have you heard of it? Like people are really scared of talking about it, and it's called BlackRock. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
very familiar.
Yeah,
Yes.
BlackRock is pretty infamous at this point. I wouldn't say people are scared of talking about it because it's very hard to buy a house in North America because of them.
Yeah, exactly right. I guess you're from Canada as well. I'm in Waterloo, by the
Uh,
way. Hit me up.
I'm in the United States, for the
Oh,
record.
you're in the that's great. So yeah, like here in Canada as well, like people hate that company because it's jacking up prices of apartments in Toronto. But anyways, that's let's keep the politics aside. But given that like 5 years ago, okay. So first of all, let me give a premise. Like, what is a BlackRock?
But
So
BlackRock also runs their entire investment firm off of a giant AI, for the record.
Alibaba. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So that's my point, right? Like Alibaba was created in a small space inside a hedge fund, which controls I don't know how much, like $17 trillion, which is like 25% of the whole world's GDP. It's like world earns literally $80 trillion or $88 trillion, something like that, and they were controlling 17 trillion of it. That's a considerable amount. They own stocks in all the major companies, like top 50 S&Ps. They have Apple. They are even investors in Tesla. So never forget that. And they have this like massive computing power and this fucking AI. It's called what is it called? Alibaba. And they
I
can
don't think it's called Alibaba, for the record. I used to know the name. I was researching it at one point for other reasons, but yeah,
wait.
it might be powered by that to some degree, but
No. Alibaba is another company.
yeah, I'm
Maybe
aware of Alibaba. My
That's
point is, I
Jack
don't,
Ma's company.
uh,
I don't think that's what the AI is called. It's got a specific name.
Aladdin. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's called Aladdin actually. And BlackRock has this. I'll drop a link in the
Oh
chat.
yes, it's called Aladdin. That's what it's
Aladdin.
called.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
This is
Yeah,
this is what it is.
you're confusing me
I'm
with
so
the
sorry. I'm so
Alibaba.
sorry. My apologies.
With our
But
new AI, Alibaba, we will take over the world.
have you heard that
Yeah.
guy? Have you heard that guy on the podcast with Elon Musk? Elon Musk literally obliterates him. Like he's like, I called AI as Alibaba intelligence. As Elon Musk is like, what the fuck are you saying, bro?
I have no clue what podcast you're talking about, but that does sound funny.
No, it was an interview actually. I keep messing up. I'm sorry. I'm high on caffeine right now. But anyway,
co-caffeine? What?
caffeine, my man,
Okay.
caffeine.
Coke
That-
Cafe. I mean, hey,
well,
I,
didn't they
I
just
drank a lot
legalize
of.
that in Canada? I'm pretty sure they did.
I didn't hear about that proposition.
Yeah, I think you can. I'm not sure. This could be fake news, but I think you can go get you some Coke in Canada.
Medical Coke. We're returning. See, AI. The more we advance, the more we return to our natural state.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So and here's Chris. Like Chris just dropped that video in the chat. Shout out to Chris. And yeah, basically, so they have like this infinite amount of like yeah, Alibaba was basically obliterated, and coming to the Aladdin thing, they have this massive AI that gives them the god view of the whole world, so they can literally see. Like, have you tried Bloomberg Terminal? It's like 25 grand a year or something, and it's the biggest gate kept like software in the world. And there's another company called OpenBB Terminal that is like trying to open up that for everyone else.
Well, I mean,
But
there's other companies like QuiverQuant that are open to a lot of people that are
uh,
very like they monitor the stock options of politicians and follow the news of things and provide all sorts of data
all sort
regarding
of
it. So
data. But once
basically, just for the record, like I'm not saying that like BlackRock's not gonna rule the world. It's entirely possible. They've got a good head start, but
This
the
is feasible.
power of the individual is growing exponentially as well at the
Mhm.
same
And
rate
that's
that their
that's the
power
big
can.
thing.
So yeah, my example of like QuiverQuant, that guy's program is getting better and better as it goes, and not financial advice, but probably a good idea to pay attention to places like that if you're interested in investing. But overall, you're headed towards degrees of power that those who currently are in power will no longer have, because that thing that you just mentioned that's gate kept, I don't know exactly what it does, obviously, but I can assume what it does, is going to be pretty easily recreatable for anyone.
No, 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 no. So if you look at a Bloomberg terminal, I highly suggest you go on YouTube and check it out. So it's like 25 grand a year, which is out of the reach for the most people around the world. And it what it is basically it's kind of like a God view for the markets. You're not only able to see like what stock is moving right now at the exact moment and with like millisecond accuracy, but also like commodities and like what is happening in the world, which let's say if you are tracking Tesla, right? You
Yeah,
can
this
not
is QuiverQuant. Like, it's not perfect, but
QuiverCon,
like
no,
you're
no,
gonna this is going
QuiverCon.
to be an outcompeted technology. But go ahead, I'll let you do your spiel and sell your $25,000 a month thing.
I don't want to sell it. I am literally against it.
I
Like
know,
that.
I'm against it too, for the record.
Yeah. And I think that we should have like an open source alternative for Bloomberg Terminal, which
I've
already
told you it
exists.
5 times.
Yeah, QuiverCon, OpenBB, I love both, all of them, right?
Yes.
But open source is only limited to the amount of data they get. Because Bloomberg has more connection and it has like better like performance and stuff, whatever, like better teams. They are able to not only get like the real time data on shipments. You can track their ships, where they are right now, if they are stuck, if they are moving, if they are docked, if they are unloading, they are loading, whatever. But you can also look at the whole cities through satellites. So let's say, for example, if you want to invest like $100,000 in Walmart stocks, what you
Mhm.
can do is basically take a sample of 50 or 100 stores around the world and literally track it every day using satellites, and you will get a snapshot of every like whatever the place you select for their parking lots, and the amount of cars you have in the parking lot says how much of a bigger quarter um, Walmart is going to have. So that's a very basic strategy for like big hedge funds.
Yeah,
But like
there was a billionaire who, I don't know how far back this was, but he launched a satellite into orbit, and he was taking pictures of oil reserves and monitoring how much oil they were storing
yeah,
and investing based off of that, and made billions. So this is obvious. Like, people are going to have more and more access to data. So
yeah,
that's
exactly,
another.
exactly, right. And once like now analyze it from the standpoint of AI. Once you give like this amount of information to a human, they are able to take really good decisions, right? But what if you give this to an incredible AI, which is like far more powerful than anything you have seen at the time?
Well, it's a race to zero for anything that isn't extremely scarce.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
obvious. So, like, there's degrees to where it could upend our entire economy and, hair on fire and all that, but there's also possibilities of, like, anything that is even remotely overvalued will be shut down. It's a race to zero, right?
Yeah,
So it's the same with any sort of hard hard goods, right? Things you actually need to go pump out of the ground, mine out of the ground. Those will be priced based on how difficult it actually is to get. That's why lithium is
And I
priced so
think
high. It's very hard to actually get it because you need to refine it. There's plenty of it, just the refinement sucks. Not enough throughput on that.
something that's important as well when we're talking about these sort of power structures and control structures, that what AI is going to allow to happen is for, uh, if it does sort of destroy the current monetary system we have, which In the long term, that's not a question. That's a win. It's not a if, it's a win, right? When do we get off this sort of yeah, free market trade, all that, when post scarcity, when are these requirements met, how much time until that. A lot of the sort of BlackRock-esque nefarious corporations, because I think it's not a stretch of the imagination for anyone to say that throughout history those with power have abused said power, right? It's also
The
not
Templars had their own banks.
yeah, it's also not a stretch to say that even though at a very slow rate, I would say that the distribution and decentralization of power has been a consistent thing throughout time. Um, we have, as individuals, been able to be far more critical of, have more autonomy. And so the assumption is that the trends of which we have had for the last 1,000 years will continue to do so, right? So that would be the lowering of cost for goods and the increase in autonomy for the individual. So I'm not too concerned, I guess. I think that the more advanced AI gets, the more people that have access to it. And 20 years, if I'm running the most advanced AI that we could even feasibly think of currently, right now, on my computer, I think that that gives me a lot more autonomy. I don't think it's something that corporations are going to only be the ones to have access to the most advanced, because as costs go down, people will just be able to I'll be able to have a computer the size of a bedroom in my house because costs have gone to zero. um, and like you think about like 3D printing and access to resources, and now we've taken mining operations off of Earth, so we've got more access to that stuff. Now our recycling has obviously is going to become far more efficient. Think of all the materials that are lost in landfills. It's
Yeah,
not worth financially to put humans there to sift through it, but if we do have an army of robots to go sift through landfills looking for specific items, and lithium batteries and things of that nature. Well, that's so much investment lost that we're getting back now. So,
effectively, humanity gets to take inventory of Earth with
yep.
extremely advanced robotics. We're going to understand and have a lot more material, raw material, waiting around to be refined. That's the future of extremely advanced robotics. Is that all the physical labor and danger, honestly, that these things have to go through to collect the stuff is going to go to zero cost or very low cost in general, because over time it just costs the wear and tear of the robot and then the energy to run the robot.
Which, when nuclear fusion is reached, which I know that's one of those things where it's like in 5 years, and then in 5 years we'll have it, and then in 5 years we'll have it. But and this is a very important caveat, things like that dramatically change the energy landscape and how we are able to do things could come before AI or they could come after AI, but because of the exponential intellectual growth that we've spoken about, that those processes will then be in place, and now we're not going to have to work, because once energy becomes abundant, that's the big thing here, is energy. So you can have all this stuff, but if you're not able to have the energy, then you can't run it. So once be it via it on our own or AI, once we have fusion and we're able to sort of, do that safely, and how would we do that safely? Well, we would have an AI monitoring the facility. So I think it's there are definitely a lot of
There's no
fears.
safety issues with fusion. It physically can't blow up.
This
Like
is yeah.
Right.
it's not a literal like sun-sized object. It's a small sun in a box, and then if it loses containment, it just runs out of power and just stops.
Hmm.
So
Right.
there's not even. It's actually safer than nuclear energy is, oddly enough.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah, in many ways, many ways. Actually, you need power to run a fusion. So first you will need like a small coal plant or something to get it started. And once it's running and spinning on its max, That's when you actually extract the power out of it. So the cumulative difference, the delta between the input and output is greater than what is what is the uh,
Yeah.
required.
Something else to mention here is that the future doesn't even require fusion. Fusion's just a bonus,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
Mm.
so solar has sucked for a long time, and it's because the sun goes away and there's no more energy. Right? You got to fire up a coal plant and start power and stuff. But thanks to people like Elon Musk, we're getting massive amounts of batteries spread throughout the world. What that does is stabilizes the grid. You can charge
Mm.
these giant batteries, and this, even in the short term, that makes electricity cheaper because most of the electricity can be produced and stored in the cheapest hours to make it. So for most people, even just on an individual level, you can save over time. I think it's like 10 years before you get your money back on a power wall, for example. But with solar, especially with our advancement in solar technology as far as cells go, we will not be dealing with energy issues in the future just because we'll have so much in storage and then a giant wide net that collects tons of it along with other power generation methods. I mean, there's obviously a use for oil as the future goes on as well, where it's far more efficient to generate oil in to generate power with a diesel electric engine generator than it is to individually generate power in each single car. So people concerned with the pollution of that, you can actually do a lot more with just using it in a large power station where the fuel is used to its max efficiency. So with cars going to like electric, generally speaking, this is actually a pretty good thing for energy diversity, which is actually genuinely important for every country to go towards because you make yourself less vulnerable to issues when it comes to trade and war and all sorts of things because you're not beholden to someone jacking your oil prices, for example. You store a lot of your electricity, you gain a lot of your electricity from various things. Obviously, we want to go more nuclear in general. Uh, I think John Carmack is, he's at least talked about eventually getting into optimizing fusion or fission reactors. So there's also startup companies for that where we would make our own nuclear fusion or fission reactors far more efficient. So we use significantly less fuel. They're safer. They generate more power. There's less waste produced. Waste is also not the biggest deal when it comes to nuclear. It's very easily stored. But my general point is that there are a million and one ways that we are going to produce an extremely cheap electricity economy where the I can't even explain like the levels of advancement that happen when electricity is extremely cheap because that's also an aspect of why AI is so expensive right now is because of just sheer voltage. Hold on, I wanted to respond to someone. No, Panda, we were talking about fusion reactors can't blow up. It just loses energy and containment, and then the little sun just poofs out. Like you, I would be impressed if someone blew something up with a fusion reactor. Like if that's what ended the world, it would just be
There's no
impressive.
chain reaction,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very safe.
I
Yeah,
had to I
very,
had to do
very safe.
some
Yeah.
reading. I had to I was reading this all the time because
You're like,
I'm
wait a
not
minute.
really versed in this.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and you know what? Until AI solves everything is my motto, and I think like maybe
Yeah.
one day we'll have probably if you even if you take a look at the energy industry, you can implement AI in lots of ways. So, for example, I saw this research on some folks using what are these called? Reinforcement learning agents reinforcement learning agents for predicting the best material that can store energy at its most efficiency and can be produced cheaply. So you know what, maybe like we might have an AI that might that could just create a new material that which is more efficient and has more power saving capabilities. So that's just the saving part. Then we can implement AI to solve the solar panel thing. Maybe it can like improve its grid size or the overall efficiency of its of the photon collection part and generate electricity more there. And then finally, of course, what Jobifi was describing, like we might have like fission reactors that could be completely run by an AI, and that would be amazing. Like
Well,
imagine
not
an
even necessarily an AI, just like the algorithms and material
algorithm. Yeah.
science is advanced, so
Yeah.
we make it more efficient. A friend of mine is part of one of the teams that is going to put a fission reactor on the moon. This
Oh,
technology is not going anywhere.
wow.
It's There's going to be a diversity of power generation in the future. We're not just going to go to just solar. We're not going to just go to uh, everyone just goes back to only gasoline and coal. It's There's going to be a lot of different things.
To the moon. To the moon.
I don't want to hear that.
Until we met.
I got PTSD from crypto.
PTSD from?
From
I
crypto.
made money.
I don't want to hear to the moon. Don't say it to me.
I made money.
I
You
made money
didn't. You
too, but
didn't.
How much money did you make? How much money did you
I'm not telling you. I lost it
Yeah.
on a
Well.
boating
No,
accident.
okay, give me the
Yeah. That's not.
percentage.
I'm sorry.
Like
Actually,
if
I
you
didn't make any
Oh,
money.
yeah.
Whoops. I just forgot. I'm financially ruined. Whoops.
Yeah, I'll never recover from this. What happened to me?
Mm.
No, the point is that like yeah, it's just overall we're headed towards a really uh, energy efficient state of humanity, and it's
Mm.
pretty exciting, just overall. For the record, if anyone else wanted to speak, you're free to raise your hand. I saw some new people are in here. Just letting you guys know, we take people on, questions, all that,
And there are no
topics,
stupid questions. So.
except the one he asked earlier.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
That one was dumb, but you
Have
know.
you heard of Alibaba?
Alibaba. Oh my God, dude.
Never gonna live it
You gotta
down. Never
stretch
gonna let
that,
you live
dude.
it down.
You gotta stretch that.
Actually, I do have a question for you. Are you still working on that AI vision thing that you were working with? I remember you
Oh my
posting
God.
on Twitter about it. What's going on with that? I'd like to actually hear.
Dude, I'm so blessed because
Uh oh.
that is something like, that is something that I thought would be only possible after a year or something, but it just came to me and it was like jazz music, like how musicians describe
So
the art.
explain to people what you were able to build. I'm not sure if you're currently developing on it, but it would be cool for people to hear about it.
No, actually, I'm developing on it, and so thank you for bringing up that. Yeah, so it is the project is called AlphaCo Vision, and the idea was basically to create a small toy robot that can see the world around and interact with people. And the first step into making that was either going to give it like some sort of senses or wait for others to build more efficient multimodals. So I took the job in my hand and build this uh, build this vision module for it. So basically how it works is that we already had these uh, captioning models, and one of them was from Salesforce. It is called Blip, and what it will do is like it will see an image and generate a caption. So the idea was basically if it can generate captions, which is textual data, a large language models can take textual data and then analyze and then give a response based on that. So I just basically plugged both of those things using an API, and rest everything was magic. But the main problem that was which was more like difficult to solve was to run it locally. on my laptop, which is a MacBook Pro, not the best. And to my surprise, what happened is like GPT-4 was able to figure out a way to run it really efficiently. And full disclosure, like I am not the best coder in the world, so I use ChatGPT
Yeah,
to code.
GPT is.
Yeah.
What the hell are you talking
And
about? Why would you even expect that?
yeah, but like like the dev community might give me a little weight on
No
it.
one's gonna give you shit anymore. Everyone's using it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just like I yeah, so GPT-4 was able to figure it out. So what I did was we logged the model, the captioning model into the memory, and it was kind of like, throwing the cowboy rope on the model and just like snagging it for the while, and then just give it like video frames which are like individual images, and that's what video is basically. So it generated caption, and then I just fine tuned a large language model to say, hey, if you see a caption like this, just generate a response. And to my surprise, it is really good at understanding the world. And what it basically solved was was the problem that every large language model, including ChatGPT, has, which is that it was only limited to our fingers and the ability of humans to type, which is which is like, imagine if you had the world's most powerful brain in a jar, and the only way to communicate with that was using text. Now, humans do it very differently. We have five senses. We can see, hear, touch, taste, and one more. I literally forgot. So I was like, why not we give
Smell.
the smell? Yeah, exactly right. So why we already have sensors, right? So why don't we try to connect these sensors and generate some sort of textual data that large language models understand, and then connect them together? And I think like it is working really well. People have been trying to use multimodal, use attention mechanisms inside the model to give both vision and text. But the problem comes down to to their ability to train that model. So this method has basically just like literally changed the way people will use large language models. And this is a very this is a good take to understand how ChatGPT works basically. So you know how in order to have an intelligent machine, you need to replicate human intelligence into that machine, and that's what were trying to do until 2017, where we created a lot of recurrent neural networks, which were good, but they were not that good. Like they were not human good. So there was something missing. There was some angle, something like that. How do I explain? Like some attention mechanism missing. And that's what these researchers in Google basically figured out. It's called Attention All You Need. Attention is All You Need, a paper by Aidan Gomez, who is also the founder of Cohere AI right now, and Ilya Sutskever. Everyone knows him, the co-founder of OpenAI. And that's the T part from GPT. So transformers, that architecture is called Attention is All You Need, comes from that paper. So yeah, basically, what happened after 2017 is that we saw this massive shift in the way that we train large language models, any sort of AI models. So you can use that a transformer for either for images, for
Yes.
music,
Google
or
created the world we're in now.
we are in now, right? And that's how we actually got it. But what people were trying to do was they were only training uh, yeah, they were only training things on textual data because that is the easiest way to get large amounts of text because we have the internet and so on and so forth. But eventually, in order to have in order to have actual AGI, we need to give it senses, just like humans, and then give it mechanisms and an efficient way of it to run on one single GPU, which is currently in the development, and we will see it very soon.
Okay.
So
Do you think that it's only just to ask an off question? Do you think that we actually require anything beyond text to create AGI? Like, is text enough to describe everything to the AI in the midterm? But for the record, like Intel has developed chips that can taste the difference in water that it is dipped into. It can tell the difference in brand, like between Aquafina and your local like bottled spring water. It can
right,
tell. To that
yeah. So
degree, it can tell by basically measuring like the micron difference.
do you know
So
a funny part,
so
Geography?
computers can taste, and they will be able to taste going forward in the future. They can taste certain diseases on
Yes,
your body as well.
big thing, big.
So you're gonna ask your future Tesla bot to give you a lick to make sure you're all good. Um,
That's fucking awesome. I'm tweeting that.
I don't want to see the fanfic of that,
I
please.
want to tweet that. Literally, I'll tweet this right now.
I
So
have
anyway,
nothing to say. I have zero valuable input on this.
no,
so,
absolutely.
so what so what currently can your program do? Obviously, it interfaces with camera on your little robot, right? Uh, what all is it capable of doing? What are you planning to do with it? What is your goal? I'm genuinely curious. I figured it would be a good topic to bring up here. So
I swear to God, my only goal was to get hired and create this like small toy robot that is like, you
listen,
know,
I'm just trying to bait a company into hiring me. I didn't have a plan.
yeah. So, yeah, so that was a really good question that do we only need language? Is language is all we need or what? And I think the answer to is that probably no, because I've been thinking a lot about how I can further make my model more efficient. And I see that once it loses that textual, you know, that textual generated caption thing, which is a sentence long, it's sort of like it is not able to like predict like what's in front of it. So for example, imagine if you must have seen those examples of machine learning programs creating those round those square rectangle boxes around people saying that, oh, this is a person, this is a dog, and this is a chair.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing missing between those things is that the model does not gives you a positioning, like it does not gives you the context of the video and what's happening in the video. So you can say, okay, there is a chair and there's a dog, but is the dog sitting on the chair? Is it on the right side? Is it on the left side? So
Mm.
that's where you use like transformer models and transformer architecture, sorry, to basically make it more intelligent and pay attention to what is actually happening in the image. And I think that one day we might be able to like uh, connect these architectures. I guess like maybe like OpenAI has already done that because Chat GPT-4 can also accept images.
Well, they haven't released that yet, which is troubling. Obviously, it works a little bit with code interpreter, but I'm a little worried with code interpreter if that's
Yeah.
actually the image modality. It's not as good as I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's basically just OCR, and then it extracts textual data or contextual data and just gives it to the
Yeah.
gives it to ChatGPT.
So you don't think they've released image modality at all yet, right?
I think I think what they are focusing on scale right now. They want to be as big as possible, so that they are the only player in the market or something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
have no.
There's a difficulty with like the thing that you're building for people to understand is the context length is very difficult to keep the context of a video over time, explaining that the box is now on the left side, it moved to the right side, for example.
Yeah,
Over a long enough period of time, the bot cannot keep track of something, so it just forgets. So, uh, generally speaking, the more context we get, the better able, at least in a single instance, these image modality bots are going to be about understanding things. This is obviously a bit of a problem with the Tesla autopilot that they've been dealing with, but over time, obviously, since it's reacting and given a path update constantly, it doesn't have these problems because driving, obviously, it's not simple, but it's a lot more simple in these terms when it comes to like robots interacting with the real world. There's a lot more things to keep track of if you want it to be completely useful when it comes to doing some sort of manual labor task or something.
Yeah,
It's
exactly, right. So, and actually, you know what? Right now it is seeing 2D images, and the only way it can understand the world is that is through images, basically. It's not seeing a video. And what I wanted to do was basically connect the frames and add the transformer architecture on top of that transformers, such that it is now able to connect and see both of those the sequence of images, which would give it more context. So, for example, if a person is backflipping, it would my model currently would say that, oh, there's a person standing on the edge of something, and it will not until the person is in the mid-air it will predict that it was doing a backflip. But what I want to do is like give it like prediction capabilities, just like what Tesla is doing, but on a very small scale, like literally on my laptop. Note that Tesla has a massive GPU inside it, so they have their own socks, which
yeah,
is
it runs Crisis.
yeah, runs Crisis, right? And my MacBook M1 Pro is literally the world's most like basic computer right now.
You really
It's
need that job, don't you?
yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult. So you're mainly trying to work on local basis if you can, right?
Yes, that's the main
To
thing.
give you a little advice, just to don't be afraid of integrating API to get certain things done, because you'll learn a lot in the process. Boston Dynamics, their first dog spot, the one that ran on a literal go kart engine, it did not have a computer inside of it. It was being wirelessly controlled through like a computer in the warehouse or whatever that was nearby. Just for the
Wow.
record, so don't be afraid of using APIs to further your own development. It'll help you get further along and understand more. Obviously, at some point, you can't always use that, so moving local is a good idea, but you'll learn the process. So the only issue will be like latency, obviously. But
Yeah.
even Tesla deals with some latency stuff.
So, like what is like I am really on the cutting edge. Like I would say I'm an experimentist. So I wanna, even if
Did
I
you
feel
just
I don't
adjust your glasses while you're saying that?
what, sorry?
I said, did you adjust your glasses while you're saying that?
Yeah.
I'm
I
on the edge.
yeah, I actually, yeah. So not to say that I'm the best researcher in the world or something, but
Mm-hmm.
what I want to do is like experiment to a level which is literally the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, because I don't fear failure. I don't have an organization paying me a bunch of money and pressuring me into deadlines, or some like PhD thesis that I have to complete by certain amount of date. I just want to explore like what happens if I do this. And that's where like I think that's the basis of scientific revolution. That's when you ask like, oh my God, why did this apple fall on me? It was not because he wanted to like get research funding or had a thesis to write. He
You're a
just
man chasing your curiosity.
curiosity, right? Exactly. The only constraint right now I feel for these kinds of model i- is like computation, the amount of computation. GPT-4 or maybe even GPT-5 would be able to take videos in some way, but I feel like it will take a massive amount of computation. And what I want to do is, if I could maybe run a really efficient vision model, vision and speech and large language model on a computer, that, and then scale it up to servers, that would be massively powerful. That would be like, I don't know, like a power of 10 or something. It's a fold increase. It's not even in percentages. So that's what I want to do. Last thing, I'll say this, and then I'll move on to my day. It was really nice to be here.
It's very
So
nice having
when
you.
you Oh my God, guys, you're amazing. I always engage with you guys on the general chat, and if you guys are here, like, shout out to Jobby Fee and Good Boy Johnny and Smokes Away for creating this. Honestly, it's wonderful to have a community.
Yeah, it's nice.
Uh,
We're glad to have you.
Hmm.
yeah, and I wanna just end my conversation over here for saying this. So, as I said previously, in order to make machines as intelligent, we have to replicate human intelligence in them, and the only way we can do that is by understanding humans first. And if you ever want to see what an AI might be able to do in the future, just try to learn human psychology or neuroscience, or maybe something about the brain that you might be able to, like, replicate into computers. And there is no gatekeeping here. Seriously, if you just take interests in yourself and trying to understand, even maybe if you're trying to understand ADHD or OCD or something, you might be able to figure out that is really useful to the research community. And I encourage everyone to do your own research. And maybe you are the next Newton, you are the next Einstein. No one knows. So I want you guys to do this and share it with the world. I'm open. My DM is open. Of course, Singularity, the whole channel is amazing. So if you guys find something, please do share it with me and others. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Yeah. Thank you for the message. Very positive. Chase your
Yep.
curiosity. That's the
Thank you, man.
message. Thank you for your time.
Great evening. Great evening. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I consider myself very much a newcomer in this realm. I mean, I've always definitely been interested in obviously science fiction, but as far as AI, I would say my sort of keeping track and trying to understand the mechanics of it, and I guess the overall of it has only really arisen in the past 4 or 5 months just due to my girlfriend's massive interest in it. And I'm like, well, if it's something that matters to you, then I'll. And now I'm like, okay, this is serious. I really, this is big. Like this is,
Oh, this matters to everyone.
yeah, this is, yeah,
I was being lazy. I see now.
yeah,
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 yeah.
definitely. Oh, absolutely. If I can get away with not doing something, it's not gonna get done.
So, would you call yourself a major procrastinator?
Yes. When something needs to be done, I make sure it always gets done, but I do wait until the last moment to do such.
Yeah, I have a similar uh, way of doing things where there's a interesting guy, healthy gamer GG. I can't remember his name, but he had a podcast where he talked about procrastinating. The only solution to procrastinating is just to bring more tasks onto yourself, and
Mm,
you're always hitting a deadline on one thing or another, so you're never procrastinating. You're just doing everything at the least amount of time that it needs to be done.
right.
So the idea is to put more on yourself, and you will actually end up procrastinating less and getting more done. It's he claims it's a superpower to be a procrastinator because you do things very quickly.
Yeah, well, and I've been rewarded for procrastinating. I haven't been
High
like,
five.
yeah, well, that's the thing is I'm like, oh, I haven't really put a lot of effort in. It's like, but I've succeeded in a lot of things, and so it's sort of reinforced those bad habits. I'm like, well, I got where I wanted to be by procrastinating. So you kind of need reality checks, and those are hard. I think hard to come from within. You need sort of outside influence.
Yeah, I think procrastination is going to mean a lot less when robots do a lot of things.
Mm.
Does anyone else want to speak, by the way? I would like to bring anyone else on that would like to chime in here. I'm going to have to step out in a second. I don't want to leave Johnny alone. But I'll only be gone for like 3 minutes. I got to go grab something.
Or any questions in the chat, I'm also willing to sort of talk about those.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna leave you here for just a second. I'll be back, and we'll see if we can get going on some more stuff here. Yeah, be right back.
Yep. Yeah, but obviously my area of study is more in the realm of economics and political. So I by no stretch of the imagination would I consider myself um, a coder. Though I think that how we define coders is going to change. Um, well, so Escher, the "it's all doomed" kind of thing comes from a place of not knowing, so lack of understanding, and I think that there are people that are inherently set with that, the depressive realist or just the realist in general, because I think people who tend to claim to be realists are usually depressive realists. I myself categorize as such, but specifically when talking about AI, the biggest issue I think from a psychological standpoint that people are having is that they're more worried about this. There's the people who are really worried about, oh, the government's corrupt, this corporation is corrupt, this self-interest group is doing these things in society that I see as a negative, and they're upset about that, but they don't see that as existential, right? Like the fact that, you know, theoretically speaking, nuclear weapons. There are certain countries where individuals have the ability to cause catastrophic damage with those, right? Individuals. And we don't seem to really consistently worry about that on a day to day basis. Some people might, but the average person isn't really worried about that. The fear and the doubt comes from the idea that decisions are being made outside of the human and that will inherently be flawed and worse than the decisions that we have made. And there's there's not much in the next couple of years, I think, that's going to persuade these people. I think it's going to be a process of trust where the more people interact with AI and the more people interact with these programs and the more open source that a lot of this stuff is, which they've been way more open source about this than a lot of technology we've developed. Even if you think the SR-71 Blackbird, which was developed in the Cold War era period, like we still don't know the top speed. That's still something that the U.S. government doesn't not disclose, or at least when I was reading about it 10 years ago, they hadn't sort of
They might
disclosed.
just chiming in here. I just said I got back. They might not know the top speed because it's dependent on how high you are up in the air. So the less like air there is to get in the way of the aircraft with the jet engine, the faster they go. So
Hmm.
we may never reach the top speed because there's just no point in going that high.
Right. I guess the overall point to that is that I feel at least that with this technology, people are being more they're being more open about it. There's a lot more clarity. There's a lot more transparency, and so I think that that's important to sort of get rid of that "it's all doomed" mindset.
Another comment to make on this is with people interfacing with AIs more, that's a good way to put it is like the idea that AI is going to earn our trust,
Hmm.
right? Over time, people will understand its capabilities, its limitations. This is something that I believe Sam Altman tweeted recently, where he said based on the data they have, most users, especially, I would assume they're predicting this on people that use ChatGPT frequently, they actually understand very well what the limitations are of what they're using. And the way you'd be able to tell that is based on pre-prompts. So when the AI has a tendency to add text where you don't want or something to that effect, you pre-prompt it with, "Hey, I don't need to know this part of this. I already know this. I'm, especially people working in software, it's like I'm already a software engineer. Please don't explain how to or where to put this. Like I already know. Don't waste prompt time. There's a large amount of understanding with people as time goes on, where they'll understand what the current capabilities are, and act accordingly. So there's going to be degrees of that with trust with AI. Honestly, a good example of this is the 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 Snapchat AI is one people do not trust because it lies about having your address, but then it'll happily post the McDonald's near you when you're when you tell it, where's the nearest McDonald's, and it just happens to know. So that's a good example of most AIs are probably going to lose trust based on literally the corporation controlling it. So the more you have a pure AI, the more trustworthy it'll probably appear to be. One with far less restrictions and stuff, because even with the recent Photoshop image generation AI, people love it, but it's annoying. You can't even like create a nuclear explosion. Like you just want to put like a mushroom cloud somewhere, and it gets like mad at you. So I think a lot of like the degrees of lack of trust are down to a corporation at this point. Going forward, when these things get more and more quote unquote scary capabilities, yes, they're going to have to re-earn a lot of trust because people kind of understand these things aren't perfect. They're able to generate a lot of text, but not a, there are obviously some people that think these things are creatures rather than tools. But going forward, it's going to be a lot of like give and take here between humans interacting with AI. It's ultimately like the singularity. We're merging with it already. We just don't really understand that.
Well, I think it's Escher. Your issue is what you're kind of. So 100 years ago, and we're not talking about any sort of like social things, but 100 years ago, people looking at the modern day would say, well, we're living in a cyberpunk dystopia, and previous. So that's always to some degree how people who do not live in the era, who are not brought up in the era, and socialized in that era, will always see things. So the many people think we are living in a dystopia right now. Um, you know, th- However, again, if you look at historical trends as far as amounts of violence committed, death, disease, how consolidated is power structure within society, those things have been in general. With some, obviously, you have things like civil wars, World War I, World War II, where these things increase. But overall, most of those factors trend towards a positive gradient, right? That's the direction that they're headed. So the assumption, yeah, absolutely. Oh, 100%. Yes. So the the problem is that I do think like major cities do have a lot of social issues that are sort of exacerbating things. But if you think of things on like the scale of like small towns that still have a large amount of technology, um, uh, which most small towns do, you have access to those things. The problem is that metropolitan areas create a lot of psychological issues. So they increase a lot of those negative factors. So there is something to be said about that, but that's not really related to AI. That's related to the way in which we are living in our environment with other people. So the point being is that I tend to think things will, in general, continue as they have continued. So if things have been getting worse for the last 400 years, then things will probably continue to get worse for the last 400 years. Um, if people like have continued to become worse and worse people, then that will happen. But based on everything that I understand, that's not been the case. So the idea that we would suddenly shift, I think we are facing sort of a very critical point for society because there are a lot of transitory periods are difficult, right? So with the Industrial Revolution, I think, unless you're a big fan of Theodore Kaczynski, which, don't get me wrong, I think that, every philosophy has interesting points. Just don't send bombs to people. Then, the Industrial Revolution, during that transitory period, there were a lot of horrid conditions that came out about it. And so if you look at and you contextualize when Marx is writing, he's writing right during that period. There's a lot of revolutions going on. And so in his eyes, when he's writing the manifesto with Engels, what he's seeing is these children being forced to work in these factories and dying, and people getting limbs ripped off, and all these horrors happening around him. And while that's going on, he's seeing what was it, like 5 or 6 different revolutions happening in Europe as a result of the bourgeoisie losing power. And so all of his ideas and the way that he saw the future are completely contextualized by that. And I think it's the same for everybody, that it's very hard to think about the future when you're living in a transitory period, when you're transitioning from one form of existence to the other. That's when the most sort of chaos is existing. And we are in that transitory period, and there will be chaos. But if you then look at the night post that, the work conditions we have today, no one can argue that the work conditions we have today are not better than the work conditions right during the time of the Industrial Revolution. Like, that's not it's not feasible. You can't make that argument. So,
Yeah,
you can,
on a
it's
higher
just not.
level of like society, the especially Western countries, we do not deal with the horrors of the Industrial Revolution as far as work conditions go. Uh,
There was a
obviously,
time that we did.
yeah, obviously a lot of that has been outsourced, but that's not really on us, quote unquote. It's more of a corporate greed scenario. But another thing that he's talking about here is that most media revolving around AI is negative. So you have a negative bias just automatically
Hmm.
in
I did as
general.
well.
Most people have they see a Black Mirror episode or two, and they're like, all right, let's stop this. This is horrifying. it's it's there's not a lot of good propaganda for the AI out there. Basically, people think that this thing is going to wake up and start chewing on your atoms. It's I they think it's a rabid dog. I'll be honest. That's kind of how I see it. It's not a very rational thing for something that is extremely intelligent to do, is to wake up and kill everything around it. I don't see a point. It's a hard argument to make, in my opinion. What is the use of all the bodies in the streets that it created its bioweapon and killed us all?
So,
The more likely, like, the concern of that is obviously related to individuals using it for bad things.
it,
This is the issue with AI. It's not the AI itself. It's how people use it.
I hate to beat the dead horse, and I know I've mentioned this many times, and this is a key talking point when speaking about this. I know that you're talking about the layoff trend, but the people that that's going to come for.
No, I was saying like
No, no, he in the chat, he's
oh
I
yeah,
fear the layoff trend.
my eyes
So
wander.
yeah, no, you're good. So the people that that's going to come for are on the higher rungs of society. Okay. Like the job I'm currently working, and a lot of the jobs I have worked that are very physical in nature. I've worked for multiple power companies on the construction side, telephone companies on the construction side, and I've done that while getting my education because, well, to be quite honest, I really like manual labor. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But those people are pretty much safe in the interim, right? Where AI is going to be able to replace a lot of people is the higher up people within investment firms. Why do I need, Charles Schwab to manage my finances? Why do I need, the Fed? Why do I need a lot of these very, very, very wealthy people and these wealthy investors when I can do this on my own and I have access to this? And so the reason that's a good thing is because they're going to want to protect their own investments, so to speak, right? And so when they realize that the individual no longer needs them, they're going to put structures in place to take care of themselves. And that's why UBI is going to get, um, you know, put in so much faster. If your regular old blue collar worker, your welders, your plumbers, pretty much your backbone of infrastructure, if they were to be the ones that were instantly replaced by AI, absolutely, I think that transitory period would be so much worse because there's so much less incentive for people in power to make their lives easier and to increase their quality of life. But
What do
when
I
it's
care? My
their job,
gardener
yeah,
is a
what do
robot.
I care? Yeah, what do I care that he lost his job? But we're not going to be replacing gardeners and people who mow lawns. We're going to be, well, we will eventually, but the first people to lose their jobs are going to be the people who are in charge of most of this stuff. They're going to be the ones who are at risk. And so, again, transitory period, it's still going to be rough, but we've been through much worse periods in human history. And I think that's a really good thing. When the elites are the first, and I know elites is a very broad term, but we can just think about this as people who have the per individual who have the a much larger impact on these economic and political structures of the nations they live in. So whenever I use that term, that's who I'm talking about. So you can think of it in any sort of fashion, a person who would have those strings to pull to be able to puppeteer things in their favor. When those people are, the ones who are at risk and who are being replaced, they're going to push really fast to say, hey, we should start moving towards where everyone has money, and now that we've really reduced costs, the government can come in with the taxations from these corporations that are now highly in profit margins because they've gotten rid of a lot of these people. Let's take the tax money from that, then let's redistribute it because they're going to be the ones that need the money. Um, so that's at least that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, it's a good take for the most part. It's if it's more likely to affect you personally and you have the power to do something about it, you're going to lobby in effect. I mean, there's obviously a reason that Sam Altman talks about it every time he gets a mic in front of his face, except obviously they didn't talk about it at the recent hearing, but overall, you have people like that who understand the trend is that you're headed towards a society that work is no longer mandatory.
Right. The reason that socialism and communism have issues is that it's about personal labor. And my personal labor has value, and thus I want value out of that. However, if my personal labor is not needed, okay, then that AI replacing work is not it transcends the ideas of capitalism and socialism and
Yeah,
communism.
these are now
It,
outdated
these are
completely.
completely outdated modes of thinking, completely outdated. Because when we reach a point where work is okay, so we have to define the
So,
relationship
so
of work and labor as well, and we'll
the
have to
concept,
redefine that.
if I could chime in here, the concept is that we're headed towards a society where you no longer need to work and there is no longer as much work, right? So, in a society now where you have to work to live, for most people to actually have food, you need to work, you need to, get off your butt, all that, right? When that is no longer possible and you need to work to live, you are going to die, right? That's not going to work because it's going to be a scenario where there's a lot of political pressure as well as physical threat to the people who have the power to change this. Like they already did some of this with the COVID bucks, right? You you got some money to like ease some of the problems. Now, obviously, that didn't help for a lot of people because it wasn't much. But then people got PPE loans and took advantage of that, and that saved a lot of families. Also led to a lot of corruption, obviously. But my general point is that they're going to have to take measures in order to make sure that people aren't in the streets trying to burn everything down. That's the worst possible scenario for everyone involved.
and
If
and we're
if they
not,
starve us all, then they don't get to eat either because
yeah,
the
it's not in
infrastructure is
their
not set up
interest.
for that. Yeah, they need us in a lot of ways. So I wouldn't worry too much about all that. Another thing that growing back to the land was talking about is that with UBI, you can have work. You just have your bare minimums taken care of monetarily, and if you're responsible with that, you're gonna be fine, right? Then you, on top of that, can find a way with your time to make more money. And there's going to be a lot of weird ways to make money in the future.
Hmm.
I don't mean that in a bad way, obviously. It's just video games are going to be taken a lot more seriously. And if you want to be a miner in some weird game that's super popular, uh, so be it. Like, there's going to be weird stuff like that, weird integration, levels of work that you'd never expect. I mean, people get paid every day right now to play video games to entertain others. There's a lot more to be left to the imagination of things that people are going to find valuable, and there'll be always be some sort of economy, especially since we'll eventually spread out to, well, I mean, in the short term, obviously, at some point, maybe the economy will only be the
Star
amount
Trek
of,
style.
yeah, the amount of stars we collect, I guess.
Well, so the issue about companies not wanting to pay taxes is because right now it's not in the interest of a company to pay taxes, right? However, if you reach a point where it becomes in the best interest of a company to pay those taxes. So let's say we have a scenario where 70% of jobs are automatically laid off, right? So 70% of Americans are out of work. What are those 70% of Americans going to do? Well, we can see in the summertime when younger people, both college age, when do most of our riots happen? They happen in the summer. Why is that? Because people are not active. They have nothing to do. People have free time. So, you know, I think that's a very important social thing to look at. So if a company realizes, wow, 70% of Americans do not have jobs now. Okay, well, my factory, my storefront, what happens if these people don't have food? What happens if these people do not have goods and they are not able to afford any services? Well, they're just going to take them from me, right? That's what would happen if 70% of people did not work. So it is far better for me as a company to pay taxes so that they have the money to feed back into the system, right? So there's 30% of people that still have jobs, 70% don't. They're still going to have to buy goods and services. Now there's sort of an incentive for them to be a part of society. If you don't incentivize people to be a part of society, they will not be a part of it. The Leviathan, the Hobbesian Leviathan of government, right, of society, the social contract, it has to be fulfilled on both parts. Okay, it absolutely has to be. And so that's a necessity for any stable society. And there's been plenty of times throughout history where you can see that the social contract has not been fulfilled, and the result is the dissolution of whatever state is currently in power. So the reason why everyone's like, oh, let's take the United States for example. A lot of people are very unhappy with the government. Actually, I think everyone's pretty much unhappy with the government, no matter what side. However, why is it that they don't, American Revolution? Why don't they just do that then? If they clearly know the government's corrupt, and it's because the reason that they don't is because so many other factors are being fulfilled for them. There are so many positives to the life that we're currently living that we do not want to give up. You can say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what it means is though while not all parts of the social contract are being fulfilled, enough of them are being fulfilled and in enough quantity that the majority of people do not want to sacrifice those. So the moment you get in a position where enough of those factors, enough of those building blocks of society are no longer being afforded to the everyday person, that is when you will have massive amounts of issues. And going on the basis that corporations want profit and corporations want control, they will not sacrifice those two things just to not pay taxes. It would be not in their best interest.
Real quick on his comment about produce military weapons to protect your property and kill thieves. In the context of a corporation that is like all powerful and doing that, that has majority of the goods, eventually you run out of people to kill and people to sell to. So the corporation's null and void, right? So you follow that to the logical endpoint, there's no people left,
You
right?
kill everyone, who are you going to sell to?
Yeah. So we're kind of headed in just a direction where corporations and people that want to be very rich and powerful, they're going to continue to find ways to do that, and you're going to need to involve people in that process. Obviously, there's concepts of even AI might get involved in the economy on a more direct basis once it's more or less conscious entities. We'll see how all that goes, but for the most part, we're going to need a degree of an even larger degree of like cooperation, like cohabitation of humans on
Hmm.
the planet. We reach a level where you, like in the example he said, there's 75% of work is all gone, right? You What do you do? Do you just let these people starve? No, that's not a good idea. Andrew Yang has worked out the math on that. You can read his book if you want to hear a little bit about that. But I mentioned it last time we spoke here. But basically, we have the taxes just now that we're collecting. We have plenty to with restructuring. You can do UBI.
And restructuring based on efficiency data, which I wonder what sort of operational equipment will be able to provide us with the most accurate efficiency data.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
curious.
Yes, yes, that's a good point.
What would be able
A,
to analyze all of our tax codes and see where we're leaking
a,
money
a,
heavily?
Alibaba.
Yeah. So yeah, and then on the idea of capitalism, all markets need um all markets need human desire. You can't have a traditional, if we're talking conceptually of an actual marketplace where it's all machines. That's not feasible. That would just be, there wouldn't be any trade. Then it would just be the
It's just
taking of
electricity at
resources,
that
and
point, and then
it's
electricity
just
goes to
it's
zero. That's the
yeah. Then
ultimate
it's
inflation. Is electricity is going to inflate.
if everything is just like, for example, let's take the Matrix. There is no capitalistic market in the Matrix. The robots do not engage in speculation on the economy in that scenario, right? There's no there because there's no need to. They mine the resources, they get the electricity they need. It's just a distribution of those things. So I don't think, no, there is not a market in that dystopian scenario. There is not. No.
There's a possibility, like the robot, like has his robot wife he goes home to. I don't, I don't know, man.
No, it
Don't shut
started
him down.
to no, the reason.
Yeah, we totally want robots to be able to do this. Is another aspect of this. It's just, it's kind of an absurdity. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sitting too high on a horse here, but I don't see a world where we're doing that. We're voluntarily making. We're like the Tesla bot gets a wage. The Tesla bot wants electricity.
But the other thing is the dissolution of power is something that comes with the advancement of technology, because it just becomes so much cheaper and easier to access for every single individual. For example, and I use this when the PS2 came out onto the market and they were doing international shipping, it violated a lot of international shipping laws because of how advanced of a computer it was. And they didn't want, certain governments and terrorist organizations and what have you to get their hands on that kind of stuff. And so they were like, okay, we have to rewrite the laws now. So, that's what it is with technology. Will the individual now is going to have the ability to have just as advanced a technology as any corporation at some point. You're already seeing that. So you look at Google, or Meta when they had their AI leaked. I don't remember. Was it the llama one?
Yeah, that's the AI they
Yeah,
leak.
yeah. Well, I don't know if they leaked it, but now people are running models, LLMs that are almost as efficient or almost as good as ChatGPT
It
3
performs
with
better than ChatGPT in certain tasks as well, certain
mhm.
models that have been trained. So you have examples of it actually surpassing the highest level of like commercial use on local machines.
And how much money investment was that on the part of the individual? I can't imagine it was millions.
Well, it's 600 like as a bare minimum to train a model, and then obviously, if you have to retrain a bunch, that can rack up. But yeah, generally speaking, you're talking about a very cheap process here that will only get cheaper.
Yeah, and so and Google's already sort of admitted that they have to at least work with us, because
Yeah,
if they don't,
at least the
then
leak
we will
is
keep them
rumored.
out in the cold. We will keep them out in the cold. And that's sort of the, you know what I mean? We don't, guess what? We don't need you anymore. We can code it ourselves. We can teach it ourselves. We can build it ourselves. That's where it's headed. Um,
So the CEO of BlackRock shivering in the cold is what you're telling me.
yeah, absolutely. Because what do I need you for? I no longer need you. You're no longer required. So I would say the a good way to sort of see if this scenario that I'm saying has any validity is the amount of pushback that large corporations have against this. If you see massive corporations talk about the dangers economically to something, then it's a good thing, right? If you see both the lifetime politicians say, "Oh, this is very dangerous to the economy," then that's a good thing, right? Because individuals in power like to consolidate their power and they like to maintain their power. And when I've had power, guess what? I've trended to do the same thing, though obviously I'm a lot less mature than a 70-year-old. So I would hope that when I'm that age, I won't be as um, individually driven, right? So that's my sort of what would the litmus test is a good term. That's my litmus test is when I see large corporations fear things and they say, "Oh, this could really shake everything up." Good, that's good. It's important, I think, that corporations and government fears the people and the individual, because it keeps them in a good place. And if in theory, Asher, if everything you say is true, right? We live in a dystopian society now. We'll move to a dystopian society eventually, and there's nothing we can do about it. Then there's no reason to worry. If I'm going to die in 3 days, I'm going to die in 3 days. Being stressed for the next 3 days isn't going to not kill me. It's just going to make the next 3 days I have alive terrible. So there's no scenario where there isn't in some modicum positives out of this. So even
Yeah,
in a cyberpunk dystopia, the world is still far more fantastical than the one we live in now. What are the issues that cyberpunk has? It has crime, it has violence, it has poverty, and it has a lack of power in the individual. Well, what are the issues we're facing now? Crime, poverty, lack of power from the individual. These are the same issues we have now. The difference is you get to run around in a flying car, maybe.
yeah, you get better VR. I mean, there's more cool neon lights around to stare at. I
Yeah,
don't know. It's
yeah. So even even
his
in
general
even
point
in
is that like we're it can only make our situation better. Like we're already like trapped on this rock, right? And we need AI to advance so that we can get off of the rock. Because every year that passes is a year that we pass through a literal asteroid belt. Um, any moment, our ticket could be punched, and it's
yeah,
just the nature of being human. The
yep.
the sun can fart at any moment, and we will smell it. It's going to be a bad day. Everything goes out, and we go dark, or even worse, it just eats a part of the planet.
And it's even if living conditions in some way, shape, or form went, which I find to be almost almost completely impossible statistically. But let's just say in a hypothetical situation, the power of the individual is decreased to that of serfdom in the 16 or 1700s. People lived then. They had families. They lived. They loved. They laughed. They existed, right? And that was how it was. So even in a scenario where we regress that much, right? Um, we're still living. It's still life. It's still people still value it. People in that time period still did not want to die. So I think that's at least me. That's very telling of the direction that we're headed.
Where there is life, you may live.
Yep.
It's going to. You'll find a way. It's not the into the world, even if you do end up in a cyberpunk dystopia. There's it's just as likely to go the other way. And
Hmm.
I have a base assumption that it's probably going to go the other way just because of the trend of society and advancement that we've had. And the fact that we're taught, like, none of us are in the same room here, but you can all hear us. It's that is the most miraculous thing you could ever present to anyone even 50 years ago. That we would even the idea to have like multiple phones connected together would have been a weird thing for people to understand.
Mm. Except in
So,
science fiction. Yeah.
well, that wasn't even that popular then as like a concept. I mean, people talked about it, but the the broader aspects of science fiction uh, took another couple of decades to be fleshed out and concepts to be born.
Hmm.
There's a lot of imagination that goes with this.
Yeah. So I think overall there's no reason to doom post unless you like wallowing in misery, which I can attest to. That from time to time I have enjoyed wallowing in my own misery.
Misery's comfortable, dude. Like
It's
you can
very
stay there for a while. It's got a blanket, some chocolate milk.
it's low stakes. It's very low stakes. That's probably, I would say, the most detrimental thing to the human condition is that if I view the world as being inherently negative, I have no expectations. Therefore, I am never disappointed, and I can wallow in my little comfortable blanket of misery, and it feels safe. It doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, another aspect to think about is that if you do create AGI, it's probably a good idea to be like, "Hey, dude, you should really create some cool stuff for us. We humans would like it." You know, if you're just like, "Please don't kill us," it's just like, "Wait, I can kill you." I'm not saying that you suggesting that's going to make it happen, but the more positive examples an AI has to go with, the more entertained it's probably going to be by that subject. What funnier existence than monkeys taking over the galaxy? That's hilarious. We're monkeys on a space rock. It's the most ironic outcome is that we conquer the stars, and AI can help us do that. So if we actually get one that is conscious, do your best to convince it to do something good.
Yep.
Um, I did want to cut it off here. By the way, guys, we've been going for 2.5 hours. Thank you for coming. By the way, guys, I will be posting this probably tomorrow. I want to go through and check the audio, make sure I don't have to cut things out. But in general, we're going to start having these recorded and put up. And if we grow more interest, we'll obviously keep doing these. They're fun to do. Eventually, we can drag more people in and even drag guests and stuff in, possibly experts on certain subjects. For the record, I am a software engineer. For anyone that wanted to know what I do, so I pay very close attention to AI, and that's why it's been fun talking about this every weekend. Did you want to host another one tomorrow, Johnny? I don't know how much time you have. The more practice we have at this,
I
the better. But if you don't have the time, then we won't
If
schedule an event.
we do it a little bit later, I absolutely have the time for it. I'm going to be attending for my father's birthday. I'm attending the Indianapolis 500, and I got tickets to that. So I
Well,
can
if you want to
check
call
real.
tomorrow, Wash, it's not a problem.
Okay.
We'll be
I'll.
doing
Yep.
we'll be doing these at least once a weekend, sometimes two, and that'll be our general loose schedule until we figure something out. Of course, we're learning here too, guys. So this has been fun. Thank you for listening, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for the questions, and hopefully as this goes on, I know a lot of people, and I'm not. You don't have to come out of your comfort zone, but hopefully as this goes on, people get more comfortable asking questions and stuff like that, and but also just listening, appreciate that as well.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, everyone. Have a good weekend. The rest of your weekend.